My hand was already on the slab when the first line of light ran up through the dust, and I did not pull it back. I should have. Every part of me that knew machine said pull back. But the cold under my palm had gone warm in a way no dead metal does, and the warmth was climbing, finding seams I had never seen in 40 years of leaning my coffee on that stone, and I stood there in the open door of my own workshed with the morning sun across my boots and let it. The slab had been a workbench my whole life. My grandfather hauled it out of the south field the year the well collapsed, and it was too heavy to move twice. So it stayed where the tractor dropped it, and we built the shed around it. Black smooth, the size of a coffin stood on end and laid back down. No tool ever marked it. We set vises on it, bled brake lines across it, butchered a deer on it one bad winter, and it took all of that the way a mountain takes weather. I had stopped seeing it. You stop seeing a thing that never changes. It was changing now. The light under my hand was the color of nothing I could name. Not the blue of welder, not the yellow of a lamp, a clean, hard white like the inside of a struck match held still. It spread out from my fingers in narrow channels, and the channels were letters, not our letters. Rows and rows of small, exact marks, deeper than any chisel, lit from inside the stone, marching out across the surface I had wiped with the same rag for years and never once felt move. I am a careful man. I took my hand off it slow. The light did not go out. That was the first wrong thing. Everything I have ever touched goes dark when I let go. This held its glow, and then it brightened, and a low sound started under the floor of the shed, not loud, the kind of hum you feel in your back teeth before you hear it in your ears. The hanging chains on the engine hoist began to sway. Dust lifted off the rafters and hung there, every mote lit white, and through the open door I saw my dog stand up in the yard and refuse to come. Closer. All right, I said to no one. My voice came out steadier than I felt. All right, what are you? The marks kept coming. They poured down the long face of the slab and pooled at the base. And where they pooled, the stone was not stone anymore. It had gone to glass, or to deep water, something with a floor I could see down into, and in that floor shapes were turning, wheels inside wheels. A mechanism old enough that the idea of old did not reach it. I have rebuilt engines that were scrap when my father was a boy. I know the feel of a thing made by hands. This was not made by hands. This was grown or poured or decided into being, and it had been sitting under my coffee cup since before I could walk. A panel I had never seen lifted out of the surface, a hand's width of darker material rising on no hinge, and on it a single line of the white marks burned brighter than the rest. They held a moment, then they changed. I watched them rearrange themselves, mark by mark, into something my eye could take, into our shapes, our letters, slow and deliberate, like a stranger sounding out a language he had only read. Claimant present, the panel said. I read it twice. The hum under the floor rose a half step. I'm not claiming anything, I said. This is my shed, assessing. The word sat there and pulsed, assessing. I have been assessed before, by lone men, by the county, by a woman I married and a woman I did not. I knew the weight of being measured by something that had already decided how the measuring would go. But this was patient in a way none of those had been. It was not in a hurry to find me wanting. It simply turned its old wheels and looked at me with whatever it used for looking, and the longer it looked, the more the shed filled with that clean white light until the shadows themselves seemed thin. I should tell you who I am, because it matters to none of this, and that is the whole point. My name is Caleb Ron. I am 61 years old. I have worked this ground my grandfather bought and my father kept, and I have never owned anything a man would envy. I fix what breaks. I keep what is mine alive one more season. When the neighbors have a thing nobody else can mend, they bring it to me, and I do not charge them what it is worth, because I have known most of them since we were children, and you do not gouge the people you grew up beside. That is the sum of me. A farmhand who is also his own hand, a man who weighs things and tries to weigh them true. The panel changed again. Prior claimants, 9,211. I felt that one in my chest, 9,000. The number meant the thing had been doing this, whatever this was, for longer than I had words to hold. 9,000 had stood where I stood, hand on the slab, and the slab had stayed dark for all of them. I did not know yet that the staying dark was the verdict. I only knew the light had come up for me, and not for 9,000 others, and that the difference was not anything I had earned by being strong, or smart, or first. What happened to them, I said, all found wanting. The hoist chains went still, the hum dropped to almost nothing. For a moment the shed was just a shed again, dust in the air, sun on the floor, an old man talking to a rock. Then the panel pulsed once more, harder, and the white light surged up the full height of the slab and threw my shadow 40 feet long across the yard, and my dog turned and ran. And somewhere out past the fence line, a flock of birds came up off the wires all at once like the sky had been struck. Ninth seat, the panel said. Authority dormant 9,000 years. Tribunal of the founding. State your line. I did not understand a word of what it wanted, but I understood the way it wanted it, the way a court calls a name and waits, the way the whole room turns to the door. I had been in that kind of quiet before, in a small county building, the day they read out what I owed and what I had left. I knew how to stand in it. "Ruan," I said, "Caleb Ruan, I don't have a line, I have a farm." The wheels in the glass floor stopped turning. Then slowly, they began to turn the other way. I want to be honest about the fear, because a man my age has no use for pretending he felt none. My mouth had gone dry, my pulse was up in my throat. Some animal part of me had been screaming since the first letter lit, telling me to get out, get to the truck, drive until the shed was a dot in the mirror. But under the fear was something I did not expect and have not been able to put down, since it felt like being recognized. Not flattered, not chosen the way a man dreams of being chosen. Recognized, the way you feel when someone you have not seen in 50 years says your name across a crowded room and you turn before you know why. Because some part of you has been waiting that whole time to be called. The slab pulled more of itself up out of the floor. The concrete cracked and lifted in a clean ring, no rubble, just the stone rising like something surfacing for air. And as it rose, I saw it was far larger than I had ever guessed. The part I had used as a bench was the top of it. Below the concrete it went down and down, a shaft of black material full of moving light, a column with no bottom I could find, and on every face of it the white marks were burning now, faster, brighter, columns of them scrolling up like the thing was reading itself aloud. "Reviewing claimant history," the panel said. "Reviewing holder line." "There's no line," I said again. "It's just me. My grandfather found you in a field." Negative. The word came hard. This seat was not found. This seat was left. And then the floor of glass cleared all the way down, and I was looking into the thing, into 9,000 years of whatever it had been keeping. And the wheels turned, and the light rose, and I understood that I had not woken it. It had woken for me. The light reached the rafters and stopped there, pressed flat against the underside of the roof like it wanted out. The shed could not hold what was rising. I knew that the way you know a dam is going before it goes. I backed to the door not to run, just to put the frame at my shoulder, and from there, I watched the column finish coming up out of the ground my family had farmed for 3 generations. It stood twice my height now and still rising, and around its base the broken concrete had arranged itself. I do not have a better word, into a low ring of pale segments, each one carved with the same exact marks, each one settling into place with a sound like a lock finding its key. 9 segments. I counted them without meaning to. 9 and a gap where a 10th should have been, and the gap was directly in front of me, directly under my feet, as if the whole machine had been built around the spot where I was standing. 9th seat vacant, the panel said. 8 seats fallen. 1 seat kept. Kept, I said, the mark scrolled. A new shape rose in the glass, not letters this time, an image. Grainy and pale, the way an old photograph looks when you hold it to a window. A man, stooped, broad in the shoulders, a hand on the slab the way mine had been. I knew the coat before I knew the face. It was my grandfather's field coat, the brown canvas one, the one that hung on a nail in this shed until the year the mice got it. I had not seen that coat in 30 years. My breath went out of me. "That's Eli," I said. "That's my grandfather. He found you in the south field." "Correction accepted with amendment," the panel said. "The finder did not find," the finder returned. "Holder line confirmed 3 generations. Prior holders uncounted." "I have thought about that word ever since," returned. "My grandfather never spoke of where the slab came from. He told us the field gave it up after the well fell, and we believed him because he was not a man who lied, and because a black rock in a field needs no story. But standing in that white light, I remembered things I had filed away as nothing. The way he kept the shed locked when he kept nothing else locked. The way he ran his hand flat across the slab every evening before he turned out the light, a touch I took for habit, the way a man pats a horse. The way the week before he died, he made my father swear, for no reason any of us understood, that the bench would never leave this ground, that it would pass to whoever worked the land and to no one who only owned it, to whoever worked the land, not whoever owned it. I had thought it was sentiment, it was an instruction. The image in the glass changed. My grandfather faded and another man took his place, older, in clothes I did not know, and behind him a low stone house I had never seen, then another. Then a woman with her hair bound up and a child on her hip, her free hand flat on a dark slab in a doorway full of light. Then another and another, faster now, a line of them going back, all with the same gesture, the same flat, unhurried hand. All of them plain people in plain clothes and plain doorways, none of them kings, none of them in armor, none of them holding anything but their own work, and every one of them, for an instant, looked out of the glass straight at me. "Holder line," the panel said, 9,000 years, unbroken. "That's not possible," I said. "We're farmers. We've always been farmers." "Yes," the panel said. And then, after a pause that felt like the machine choosing its words, "That is why the seat was kept." The hum came back up. The wheels in the column spun faster, throwing white light in slow sweeps across the walls, and I had the sudden clear sense that I was being shown a file, my family's file, a record kept by something that did not forget and did not exaggerate and did not flatter. 9,000 years of plain people putting a hand on a stone, not worshiping it, not begging it, just keeping it, the way you keep a promise you have stopped remembering the reason for, because the keeping has become the reason. A second panel rose beside the first, and the marks on it were different, heavier, slower, the kind of writing you only use for things that cannot be unsaid. The tribunal of the founding sat in judgment of the worlds, it said. 9 seats, 9 arbiters. The tribunal weighed every claim brought before it, the strong against the weak, the many against the one, and gave each its true weight and no more. The light dimmed just slightly, the way a man's voice drops when he comes to the hard part. The strong grew tired of true weight, the panel said. 8 seats were bought, or broken, or burned. The 8th arbiter fell to his own house. Only the 9th would not be moved. I stood very still. Out in the yard, my dog had crept back to the edge of the light and lay flat with his ears down, watching me the way he watched a storm. The 9th arbiter saw the end coming, the panel said. He could not save the tribunal. He could save the law, so he did not guard it with armies. Armies can be bought. He gave it to the only keepers who could not be bought, those with nothing to sell. The image rose one more time. A man at the foot of a black column, in a hall vast enough to swallow my whole farm, and around him not soldiers but laborers. People with dirt on their hands, people who looked like the people in every doorway since. He was putting their hands on the stone, one after another, passing it down, sending the law out of the dying hall and into the hands of the lowest people in the world, the ones the strong never bothered to corrupt, because the strong never bothered to notice them at all. He scattered the seed among the humble, the panel said. He told them one thing: keep it, weigh what comes to you true. When the line produces one who has never weighed false, the seat will wake, and the tribunal will convene again. The hum rose to a tone I felt in my spine. 9,211 claimants, the panel said. All came to take the seat. All were found wanting. The seat is not taken. The wheels stopped. The seat is earned, and the white light turned all of it at once and fell on me. I did not feel earned. I felt like a man caught out. A whole life rose up in front of me in the space of a breath, the way they say it does when you are drowning. And I went looking through it for the false weight, the thumb on the scale. The day I had cheated and called it getting by, there were small ones. There are always small ones. A horse I sold, knowing its wind was going. A fence line I let drift 6 inches onto a neighbor's ground and said nothing for a season. I had no illusions about being a good man. I had buried a marriage in my own coldness. I had let my brother carry more of our father's dying than I did, because I could not stand the room and he could. You've got the wrong man, I said. I'm not clean. Nobody's clean. Clean is not the measure, the panel said. The marks slowed, gentled, the way a hard voice gentles when it sees it has been misunderstood. The tribunal does not weigh whether you have sinned. It weighs how you weigh. A new image came up in the glass, and this one I knew because I had lived it. A barn in winter, a dispute. 2 men I had grown up with, standing on either side of a dead calf and a broken gate, each one sure the other owed him. They had brought it to me because I was the one people brought things to, and I had stood between them in the cold with my breath smoking, and I had done the thing I always did. I had taken the strong man's side apart first. I remembered it. The bigger man, the louder man, the one with the better lawyer and the deeper pockets, had a clean story and a clean claim, and I had pulled it open thread by thread until the truth under it showed, which was that he had let his own fence rot and his own bull through it, and the smaller man owed him nothing, and was owed an apology he would never get. I had said so. I had said it plain in front of both of them, and the big man had not spoken to me for 2 years, and I had not cared, because the small man had needed someone to weigh his side as heavy as the loud ones, and there had been no one else to do it. I had thought it was just being fair. I had never once thought of it as a law. The strong against the weak, the panel said. The many against the one. You gave each its true weight, and no more. 9,000 years your line has done this, in fields, in barns, in small rooms with nothing to gain. The tribunal has been watching the whole time. More images, fast now, a flood of them. Not great deeds. Small ones, my father refusing to let a banker foreclose on a widow a day early. His mother feeding a drifter and then telling the sheriff, who came looking for a thief, that she had seen no one because she had weighed the man's hunger against the law's hurry and found the hunger heavier and the man harmless. A great-grandfather I never knew standing up in a town meeting to say a thing nobody wanted said. On and on, back through the doorways, plain people weighing the strong against the weak and coming down again and again on the side that had no one else. Not because they were saints, because they could not help it, because it had been bred into them across 90 centuries by a dying man in a far hall who had decided that justice was too important to leave to the powerful. I had to put my hand against the doorframe. My legs had gone unreliable. Why now, I said. Why me? There'd been better than me in this line. You showed them to me. Why did you sleep through all of them and wake for the man who sold a sick horse? The panel was quiet for a long moment. The wheels turned slow. The line must produce one who has never weighed false, it said at last. Not one who has never sinned. One who has never, when given a scale and two claims, put his thumb on the heavy side. Search your life. You sold a failing horse. That was a bargain, not a judgment. You let a fence drift. That was a theft you made good when it was named. Search for the day you sat between two claims and chose the stronger because it was stronger. I searched. God help me. I searched hard because I wanted to find it. Wanted to hand this thing back and go inside and have my coffee and let the slab be a bench again. I searched every dispute I had ever been pulled into, every two men and one wrong, every time I had been the one in the middle. And I could not find it, not because I was good, because the one thing my coldness had never touched, the one place I had never learned to flinch, was the scale. When two claims came to me, I weighed them. I had buried a marriage rather than weigh my own comfort heavier than her need, and I had not even known that was what I was doing. The defect in you is real, the panel said, and there was no cruelty in it, only the flat accuracy of a thing that does not lie. You are cold, you have let people carry what you should have carried, but you have never sold a verdict. 9,211 came to take the seat by right of blood, or strength or want. Not one of them came to it having never, once, favored the strong. You did not come to it at all. You put your coffee down. I laughed. I could not help it. It came out cracked and strange in all that white light. I put my coffee down, I said. Yes, the panel said, and the seat woke. The shed could not hold it any longer. I heard the roof go before I saw it, a long groan of nails leaving wood, and then the whole roof lifted off in one piece, tilted, and slid into the yard with a crash that sent the chickens screaming. I did not flinch. That should have frightened me, that I did not flinch. But the light had gotten into me by then, and the small frights had stopped landing. Above me, the morning sky opened up clean and blue and ordinary over a column of 9,000-year-old judgment standing in my barnyard, and the contrast of it, the blue sky and the white law, is the thing I will see when I close my eyes for the last time. The column was fully risen now, 3 times my height, and the ring of 9 pale segments lay complete around its base but for the gap at my feet. The marks on every face had stopped scrolling. They held steady, bright, a thing finished reading and ready to speak. A second column was rising beyond the fence line. I had not seen it until the roof came off. Out past the south field, where the well had collapsed, where my grandfather had said the field gave up the slab, out there the ground was cracking. In a clean ring and a black shape was climbing out of it into the light, twin to the one before me, and beyond that a third, far off against the tree line, and I understood that the slab in my shed had never been alone. The seat had been scattered, yes, but it had been scattered near, kept close. 9 seats hidden across the holdings of 100 generations of plain people who had been told only to keep them, and somewhere out there, beyond my sight, the other 8 were lighting too, called awake by the one that had finally found its arbiter. Convening, the panel said. 8 seats respond. The tribunal has not convened in 9,000 years. Wait, I said. The word came out of me before I knew I meant it. Wait, what does convening mean? What happens when you convene? The worlds will be weighed again, the panel said. Every claim left unjudged since the tribunal fell. Every strong hand laid on a weak one while the law slept. All of it brought to the scale. The hum that came up then was not a sound. It was a pressure, a vast slow turning, as though something behind the sky had begun to lean its weight against the world. I felt it in the fillings of my teeth and the marrow of my bones. Out past the fence, the second column flared white to its crown. Far off, the third, and in the glass at my feet, a number began to climb. Claims, I understood, claims by the 1,000, by the million, every wrong that had gone unweighed pouring into the waking machine to be given at last its true weight and no more. I thought of the loud men of the world, the bought courts, the deep pockets, and the better lawyers. I thought of every barn I had ever stood in the middle of where the strong had a clean story and the weak had only the truth, and I thought, with a cold, clear certainty that I have not been able to shake, that a great many powerful people were about to be measured by something they could not buy, could not break, and could not even find, and I was the gap in the ring, the 9th seat, the vacancy under my feet. Presiding seat requires an arbiter, the panel said. The tribunal cannot weigh without the 9th. The marks brightened, urgent now, the only urgency the thing had shown. State your acceptance or your refusal. The seat will not take a man against his will. That is the first law. No one is judged who has not freely stood to judge. I stood at the edge of the gap and looked down into 9,000 years. I will not pretend I weighed it cleanly. I am a farmhand. I had a dog who needed feeding and a fence in the north quarter that was 3 days from going, and a brother I had not called in a year. I did not want to weigh the worlds. I wanted my coffee and my quiet and my slab to be a bench. Every selfish bone I owned, and I owned a great many, told me to step back from the gap, say the word refusal, and let the light go dark, and live out my days an old man who once touched a strange rock and walked away. But I thought of the small man in the cold barn 20 years gone, who had needed someone to weigh his side as heavy as the loud ones. I thought of how few there are in this world who will do it, how the loud always have someone, and the small almost never do. I thought of my grandfather running his hand flat across the stone every evening, keeping a promise he had stopped remembering the reason for, and of his mother feeding a hungry man and lying to a sheriff, and of all of them, all the way back, the plain stubborn line of them who would not put a thumb on the heavy side, though it would have cost them nothing. They had kept it 9,000 years so that someone could stand where I was standing. It would have shamed every one of them for me to step back. What do I have to do? I said. Weigh what comes, the panel said. True and no more, as you have always done. I lifted my foot to step into the gap, and the light went out, all of it. The white columns across my fields, the marks burning on every face, the hum in my bones, gone. Between one breath and the next, like a hand had been laid over a flame. The shed stood roofless and ordinary in the plain morning sun. The black tower in my barnyard was just a black tower, dark, dead. The wheels in its glass floor stopped. My dog lifted his head. A rooster crowed somewhere, absurd in the silence. For a moment I thought I had imagined the whole of it, that I was a sick old man who had passed out against his workbench and dreamed 9,000 years. Then a single line of marks lit on the dark panel. One line, dim, almost spent. A claim is lodged against the arbiter, it said. Against me, I said. My foot was still half raised over the gap. I put it down on the safe side of the ring. The ninth seat woke for you, the panel said. Its waking is a claim. Any arbiter may contest a claim. One has reason. The wheels in the glass floor turned over, slow, grinding, like a thing forcing itself awake against its own weight. And in the cleared glass at the foot of the tower, a shape resolved, not an image this time, not a recording. Something present, something there. A figure of pale light folding itself up out of the floor and standing, tall, robed, with a face that was almost a face, the way a statue's face is almost a face, and eyes that found me and held me and were not amazed and were not kind. The eighth seat, the panel said. Contestant. Survived. You said the eighth fell, I said. You said he fell to his own house. The figure spoke, and its voice came not from the air, but from the marks themselves. The panel scrolling its words as fast as the thing made them. The eighth arbiter fell, it said. His seat did not. I am what the seat kept of him. 9,000 years I have waited, in the dark for the tribunal to wake, and it wakes, for this. The light of it swept me head to foot, and where it touched me I felt weighed and found small. A farmhand, a seller of sick horses, a man who could not sit beside his own dying father. This is the ninth arbiter. This is who the line produced. I did not answer. There was no answer. Everything it said was true. The claim, the panel said, flat and even, the way the machine had been before the contestant rose, state it. I contest the waking, the eighth seat said. The ninth is unfit. The tribunal cannot convene on a crack seat. Weigh him. Weigh him as he would weigh another, and find him wanting, and let the law sleep another age until a worthy hand is born. And the white light came up again, but cold now, narrow-aimed, not the broad, warm flood that had recognized me. A single hard beam, falling on me alone, and I understood with a lurch in my gut that the thing was no longer reading my file to honor it. It was reading my file to break me. The images came back into the glass, but they were the wrong ones now. The sick horse, the drifted fence, the cold of my marriage, my brother's face in the hospital corridor looking for me, not finding me. The contestant pulled them up one after another and held each to the light and let the gathered tribunal see, and far off across my fields the dark columns flickered, considering, weighing whether the eighth seat was right. I felt the seat under my feet go uncertain. The vacancy, the gap that had risen to take me an hour ago now hung open and cold, deciding. A cracked seat, the eighth seat said again, and there was something under its flat words now, something hungry, something that had waited a very long time in the dark and did not mean to go back. Let me preside. I am whole. I have survived where every other fell. Give me the presiding seat, and I will convene the tribunal and weigh the worlds, and this broken old man may go back to his field. It was reasonable, that was the worst of it. Standing there with my whole shabby life lit up cold for a court of risen law, I thought, he is right, let him have it. I am not the man for this. I sell sick horses. I could not sit with my own father. And then the central panel, the one that had recognized me, lit one quiet line of its own beneath the contestant's blaze. The eighth arbiter, it said, fell because he weighed his own survival heavier than the law. The cold beam wavered. Ask him, the central panel said, how he survived when every other seat fell. The contestant did not answer at once. That was the first crack. I have stood between enough men and enough barns to know the silence that comes when a clean story has a thread loose in it, and this was that silence, stretched across 9,000 years. Answer, the central panel said. I survived because I was wise, the eighth seat said. The marks came slower now. The strong story, opening. I saw the tribunal falling. I made terms. I preserved what could be preserved. You made terms, I said. I had not meant to speak, but this was a thing I knew. This exact thing, the shape of it identical across all the distance between his world and my barn. With who? With the ones who were burning the other seats. The cold beam on me flickered again, and for the first time it left my face and turned, just slightly, toward the central panel, toward the place the question had come from, as if it could not quite believe a farmhand had found the thread. With the strong houses, the central panel said, answering for him, because he would not. The eighth arbiter was brought a claim. A strong house against a weak world. The weak world was in the right. The strong house offered the eighth arbiter his life, and his seat and the survival of his line, if he would weigh the claim their way. The images came up in the glass again, but mine now, not the contestants'. The central panel pulled them, a hall on fire, a robed figure at a black column, and across the floor from him a delegation of tall, hard shapes holding out a thing that glowed, an offer, a bargain, and the robed figure reaching for it. He weighed the strong house heavier, the central panel said. Once, a single verdict, the weak world fell. The eighth arbiter lived. That is how he survived when every other seat burned rather than bend. Not wisdom, a thumb on the heavy side. The contestant's light flared white-hot furious, and the cold beam slammed back onto me full force, harder than before. It was one verdict, it said, and now there was no flatness in it at all. Now it was a voice I knew, the voice of every loud man in every barn who feels the truth closing on him and reaches for volume to keep it back. One verdict in 10,000 years of judgment. One, and it bought the survival of a seat. Without me, there would be no tribunal to wake. I am the only arbiter who endured. And you would pass me over for this cellar of horses, this cold sun, this nothing from a field. Yes, I said. The word came out of me quiet, and it stopped him. It stopped the whole risen tribunal. Across my fields, the dark columns held still. You weighed it once, I said. That's the whole thing, isn't it? You think because it was one verdict. You think because it was only once, it doesn't count against 10,000. But that's not how the scale works. I've stood in the middle of 100 fights, and I'll tell you what I learned. It's not the man who never faces the temptation who keeps it clean. It's the man who faces it and doesn't bend. You faced it once. You bent once. And a whole world fell for your once. I looked up at the cold light of it, and I was not afraid anymore, which surprised me. I've sold a sick horse. I've let a fence drift. I've been a cold man and a poor brother. But nobody ever brought me a weak claim and a strong man's purse in the same hand and watched me reach for the purse. Not once. You can have my whole shabby life on the scale. There's no thumb on it. That's all the seat ever asked. The central panel lit, bright and clean. The arbiter has weighed the contestant's claim, it said. I have, I said. State the verdict. I looked at the eighth seat, the survivor, the one who had waited 9,000 years in the dark for his chance to preside, and I felt no triumph in it, only the old familiar weight of a thing that has to be said plain in front of everyone whether they want it said or not. The claim is denied, I said. He's not unfit because he survived. He's unfit because of what he did to survive. A man who will weigh a world's life against his own once will do it again the moment the price is right. The seat slept 9,000 years rather than wake on a hand like that. It can sleep 9,000 more before it takes him. But it doesn't have to, and it didn't wake for him. Verdict recorded, the central panel said, and the eighth seat screamed, not in sound, in light, a long white tearing across the sky, and then it folded down into the floor of the glass and was gone. And the cold beam went out, and the broad warm flood came back up around me, and across all my fields the dark columns flared white again. One after another, the convening reconvening, the tribunal whole but for the gap that still hung open at my feet. Presiding seat requires an arbiter. The central panel said, gentle now. The contest is answered, the seat is yours to take or leave. My foot was already lifting. The pale segment that had been missing rose up out of the broken concrete and closed the ring around me, and the white light came up through the soles of my boots and into me, and for one long moment I was not a man standing in a barnyard. I was a place. A seat. A weight on a scale that had been empty 9,000 years. I want to tell you it felt like power. It did not. It felt like being handed the heaviest thing in the world and being told quietly that you would now carry it and never set it down. I felt the claims arrive, not as numbers anymore, as weight. Every wrong unjudged since the law fell, every strong hand on a weak one, pressing in against me from all sides, asking to be measured. It would have crushed any man who wanted it. It did not crush me, I think, only because I had never wanted it, and the seat had known that before I did. The first claim came forward out of the flood and laid itself in front of me, and I knew it the way you know your own name. It was old. It was vast. It was a world I had never seen and a people I would never meet, and a strong house that had broken a weak one and dressed the breaking up as law, and it sat in front of me waiting for its true weight, and the whole risen tribunal, 8 columns blazing now across my fields and the fields beyond, a ring of white fires miles wide under the blue morning sky. The whole of it went still and turned to the 9th seat and waited. I did what I had always done. I took the strong claim apart first. I pulled the clean story open thread by thread, the way I had in the cold barn, and I found the rot under it. A covenant signed under threat, a famine engineered and called an act of weather, a generation worked to death and recorded as willing labor, and I weighed the weak claim and found it heavy with the simple truth, and I gave each its weight and no more, and I said what was so. The light around me pulsed once, hard, in time with the words, and somewhere across the worlds I felt a thing that had stood unjudged for an age finally come down on the side that had no one. Verdict recorded, the central panel said. I had time for one breath. Then the second claim came forward. It was larger than the first. A war 10 centuries old that the winners had written into law as a liberation. The losers had no winners' records to speak from, only the weight of what had been done, and that weight came and laid itself before me and waited, patient the way the small always wait, having learned across an age that no one is coming. I took the liberation apart. Under it was a hunger for a strip of sky mines and nothing nobler, and I weighed the dead against the mines, and the mines came up light as ash. I said so. Verdict recorded. The third claim was larger still, and the fourth larger than that, and I understood that the machine was not handing me cases at random. It was building. It was starting me on the old, the distant, the safely dead, and working its way forward, testing the new 9th seat on lighter weights before it brought the heavy ones. The way you load a green horse easy before you ask it to pull, and I understood, with a cold lurch, where the heavy ones would come from. The tribunal had woken on earth. It had woken in my barnyard. The nearest unweighed wrongs in all the worlds were the ones outside my own fence. I was right. The 5th claim was not a far world. It came up out of the glass slower than the others, almost shy, and when it resolved, I knew the ground in it. Red dirt, a dry wash, a fence line running off toward a low blue range I had seen on calendars all my life. It was my own country. Not my valley, but my country, the wide, hard middle of it, and the claim it carried was as old as the country itself. A people had been moved off that ground, walked off it, in winter, at the point of a thing that called itself law, so that other people could have the dirt. I knew the story the way every man my age knows it, as a paragraph in a school book, a thing that happened long ago and far away and to someone else, settled, done, written down the winner's way, and left there. The claim did not carry it that way. The claim carried the cold of that winter and the count of who did not survive the walk, and it laid that down in front of the 9th seat and waited for its true weight, and the whole tribunal turned to me, the human, to weigh the humans. I will not pretend my hand was steady. These were my own, not the strong house of some dead alien war, my own country, my own forefathers, the men whose ground I farmed and whose name I carried somewhere far back. The seat did not care. The seat had never cared whose the claimant was, or whose the wrong. That was the whole of it. That was why it had been kept by people with nothing to sell, because people with something to sell always find a reason the scale should tip their own way. I took the law apart, the law that had moved them. I pulled it open thread by thread the way I had pulled open the alien houses, and there was no difference under it, none at all. A hunger for ground dressed as order, signed by men who knew better and did it anyway. I weighed the dead of that winter against the ground they died for, and the ground came up light, the way the sky mines had, the way the strong claim always comes up light when you finally put the truth on the other pan. Guilty, I said. My voice cracked on it. The claim is true. The wrong was done. It weighs what it weighs, and nothing that came after makes it lighter. Verdict recorded, the panel said. And out along my fence line where my neighbors stood watching, I heard a sound I have not been able to forget. Not anger, not protest. A long breath let out by 20 people at once. The breath of people watching a thing be said plain, that everyone had always known and no one had ever weighed. Old Tom Aldred, who had farmed the next section 40 years, took his hat off. He did not say why. He just took it off and held it against his chest the way you do at a graveside, and stood there bareheaded in the white light, and one by one the others did the same. The arbiter weighs his own, the central panel said. This is the test the 8th seat failed. The marks brightened. The 8th arbiter could weigh any house but his own. When his own house was the strong claim, he put his thumb on it. You did not. It's not pride, I said. I was looking at Tom's bare head. Don't make it pride. I didn't want to say it. There's nobody in that grave who isn't somebody's grandfather. But you don't get to weigh false because the false side is yours. That's the one rule. That's the only rule there ever was. Yes, the panel said. That is the only rule. The sixth claim came forward, and it was nearer still, a thing done in living memory, in my own lifetime, by men I could have named, and I waited, and it was hard, and I did it. The seventh was harder. By the eighth I had stopped flinching, not because it had gotten easier, but because the flinching was a luxury the seat did not allow, and the small claimants could not afford. They had waited an age. The least I owed them was a steady hand, and somewhere in the eighth or the ninth, with the white light pouring through me and my whole valley standing bareheaded along the fence, I felt the thing change. The claims stopped being a flood I was drowning under. They became work, hard, plain, unending work, the kind I had done my whole life, the kind my father had done and his mother before him. Weigh the thing in front of you. Weigh it true. Set it down. Reach for the next. It was the only work I had ever been good at, and it turned out to be the only work the worlds had ever truly needed, and the line I came from had been training me for it across 90 centuries without my knowing, one fair barnyard at a time. It was Tom Aldred who broke the spell, in the end. Not a king, not a council, a neighbor in work boots. He came through the gap in the fence where the gate had been before the roof flattened it, and he came slow, and he stopped at the edge of the white light where the broken concrete ring began, and he stood there with his hat still in his hand, and his face turned up at me where I stood inside the seat. "Caleb," he said, "just my name. The way you say a man's name when you have known him 60 years and you are not sure suddenly that you know him at all." "Tom," I said. My voice came out of the column louder than my own throat, doubled, the seat speaking with me. He flinched at it, but he held his ground. He was always a stubborn man. It is why I liked him. "What is it?" he said. "What's it doing? What are you doing?" I tried to tell him. I do not know how much of it landed. I told him it was a court, the oldest court, that it had gone to sleep when the powerful got tired of being judged, and that it had been kept alive all this time by plain people like us who never knew what they were keeping, and that it had woken because the line of keepers had finally made a man who had never sold a verdict. Tom listened to all of it with his head tilted, the way he listened to a man trying to sell him a tractor. Then he said the thing that I think the whole watching valley was thinking. "And it picked you," he said. "Not a judge, not a senator, you. The fella that fixed my baler for a case of beer." "It picked me because I fixed your baler for a case of beer," I said. "That's exactly why. You don't fix a man's baler for a case of beer if you've got a thumb you like to put on the scale." Tom thought about that. Then he laughed, short and rough, the way men our age laugh when a thing is too big to do anything else with. "Hell," he said. "Hell, Caleb." And he put his hat back on, and he stepped back to the fence, and he stayed. The ninth claim came forward then, and it was the largest yet, and it was not from any world at all. It was from the deep between them. A thing the strong houses had done together, all of them, the last great wrong before the tribunal fell. The breaking of the law itself, the murder of the court, 8 seats bought or broken or burned, the ninth arbiter hunted to his grave, the whole machinery of true weight torn down so that no one would ever again be told what their power actually weighed. That claim came up out of the glass vast and black and old, and it laid itself before me in the entire risen tribunal, all 9 seats, my own among them now, turned away the crime that had silenced it. I felt the 8th seat stir as it came. The contestant, folded down into the floor, defeated but not gone, I felt it there in the dark of the glass, listening, because this was the claim that touched it nearest. The breaking of the law was the thing it had survived, the thing it had bent for. The strong house it had served had been part of this, the great consortium of the powerful that pulled the court down, and if I weighed this claim true, then I weighed the 8th arbiter's whole survival as the crime it was. "Weigh it," the central panel said. And then, quieter, in marks that came slow, "This is the claim the tribunal woke to hear. Every other verdict waits on this one. Who broke the law, and what it weighs." I stood in the seat a long time, my valley waited. The sky stayed blue and ordinary over all of it. "The houses that broke the court," I said at last, "did it because the court told them the truth about themselves and they couldn't stand to hear it. That's the whole crime. Not greed, not even cruelty. They couldn't stand to be weighed, so they killed the scale." I looked down into the glass, into the dark where the 8th seat listened. There's no weight heavy enough for it. A man who does wrong you can weigh. But a man who destroys the thing that does the weighing, so that no wrong can ever be named again, that's the one wrong the scale can't hold, because it's an attack on the scale itself. The light around me dimmed, waiting. "But I'll tell you what it weighs," I said. "It weighs everything that went unjudged after. Every claim in this flood. Every winter walk. Every engineered famine. Every world broken while the law slept. All of it traces back to the day that killed the court. So that's the verdict. The houses that broke the tribunal carry the weight of every wrong that the broken tribunal couldn't judge. All of it, down the whole 9,000 years. That's their true weight. The marks on every column flared at once, white and hard, and a sound went through the worlds that I felt rather than heard, a vast settling, like the foundation of something enormous shifting at last onto the place it was meant to rest. Verdict recorded, the central panel said. And then, the court is restored. The eighth seat rose one more time. It came up out of the floor of the glass slower than before, dimmer, its robed light frayed at the edges the way a thing looks when it has spent the last of itself. I had thought it defeated. I had thought, when I denied its claim, that I had set it down for good. But a thing that has waited 9,000 years in the dark does not let go of the thing it waited for because one farmhand says no. You weigh the breaking of the court, it said, and you lay it on the houses. The mark scrolled, ragged. But I served a house one verdict. You said it yourself, one thumb once, and now you make that one verdict the weight of 9,000 years. The light of it leaned toward me, pleading now where before it had accused. I held the last seat. I kept a fragment of the tribunal alive through the dark. Without me there was no court to restore. Does that weigh nothing on the other pan? It was the oldest move in the book, and I had seen it in 100 barns. The loud man, beaten, reaching past the wrong he did for the good he claims came of it. Look at what I built. Look at what I saved. Surely that counts. Surely you weigh the whole of a man and not just his worst hour. And the thing is, it does count. That is what the strong never understand about a fair scale. It frightens them more than a hanging would. A fair scale does count the good. It counts every grain of it, honestly, which is exactly why they cannot bear it. Because when the good is counted honest, it is so often not enough. It counts, I said. I'll count it. You held a fragment of the seat alive. That's real. Put it on the pan. The eighth seat brightened, hope flaring in it. Now I'll put the other pan in, I said. The world that fell because you weighed false. The one whose dead came up against the sky mines, light as ash. You remember it. You weighed it yourself. I let that sit. Here's the weight of your good, one seat kept. Here's the weight of your wrong, one world lost and every soul on it, and every grandfather and grandchild that world would have made across 9,000 years. All of them gone because you wanted to live. Weigh them against each other. You're an arbiter. You know how? Tell me which pan goes down. The eighth seat did not answer. It could not. That was the cruelty of a true scale, and the mercy of it both at once. It had weighed 1,000 claims. It knew better than I ever could exactly which pan went down. A seat kept against a world lost. It was not close. It had never been close. The eighth arbiter had spent 9,000 years in the dark, telling himself it was close, that the good he did weighed against the wrong, that surely the whole of him came out even. And a true scale had just told him, gently and without anger, that it did not and never had. I'm not going to destroy you, I said. That's not what the seat is for. The seat doesn't punish. It weighs. So here's your weight. True and no more. You did one good thing and one terrible thing. And the terrible one is heavier, and it will always be heavier, and you will carry the knowing of that for as long as the court stands. That's all. That's the verdict, not death. Just the truth about what you are, said Plain, where you can't unhear it. The eighth seat stood in its frayed light for a long moment, then it bowed, slow, deep, the bow of a thing that has finally been told the one thing it spent an age refusing to hear, and has at the last decided to stop refusing. And as it bowed, it began to dim, not torn down, not screaming this time, just fading, the way a man fades when the fight he has been living on finally goes out of him. Verdict accepted, the central panel said. And then, in marks I had not seen it used before, softer, almost private, the eighth arbiter is at rest. 9,000 years he could not be weighed, because he would not hold still for it. You held him still with his own scale. That is a mercy no army could have given him. The eighth seat was gone. Where it had stood, the glass was clear and quiet. And I understood then the thing the line had really been keeping. Not power, not even justice. Exactly. The willingness to weigh true, even when the false weight would be kinder. Even when the true weight breaks the one you are weighing. Even when the one you are weighing is your own house, your own country, your own self. The strong cannot do it. They have too much to lose by the truth. Only the people with nothing to sell can hold the scale steady. And so the dying court had given the scale to them, and they had kept it, fair barnyard by fair barnyard, until it could wake again on a hand that would not bend. There was a stretch in the middle of it I have not told anyone, not Tom, not my brother, and I will set it down here once and then leave it. Around the 10th claim, or the 12th, I had stopped counting the way you stop counting bales past a certain point in a long day. The court brought me a thing that was not a wrong done by the strong to the weak. It was a wrong done by the weak. A small world, a poor one, a people who had been ground under for an age, who had at the first taste of power turned and done to a weaker neighbor exactly what had been done to them. Walked them off their ground, wrote it into law, the whole bitter shape of it repeated by the very ones who knew best what it cost. I sat with that one a long time, because part of me wanted to weigh it light. Part of me wanted to say, They suffered, they didn't know better, the strong made them this way. Put the thumb on their side, they have earned a thumb, and the seat let me want it. The seat never stopped me from wanting the false weight. It only waited to see whether I would set it down. The wheat can do wrong, the central panel said, very quiet, when it saw me hesitate. The scale does not tilt for sympathy. That is the hardest law. The eighth arbiter could weigh the strong. He could not weigh the suffering when the suffering were in the wrong, because he loved them, and love is a thumb like any other. I thought about the small man in the cold barn 20 years gone, the one I had taken the loud man's side apart for. I had been so sure that day that I was the one who weighed for the underdog. And here was the seat telling me that the underdog is not always right, that the weak can become the strong and carry the strong's whole sin with them, and that a man who only ever weighs for the small is just a man with his thumb on a different pan. The claim is true, I said at last. It cost me. They were wronged. That weighs what it weighs on its own pan, and I'll record it. But it doesn't pay for what they did. You can't buy a wrong with a wrong you suffered. The neighbor they walked off the ground is owed the same true weight as anybody. And the fact that the ones who walked them were themselves once walked, that's a tragedy, but it's not a defense. Guilty. Both wrongs recorded. Neither one cancels the other. Verdict recorded, the panel said. And then that was the true test, arbiter. Not your own house, your own heart. You wanted to weigh false for pity, and you did not. I have not been the same since that one. It is easy to be fair to people you do not care about. The horse trader, the dead alien house, that costs you nothing. It is the ones you ache for who break most men's scales. The seat had shown me the place I could have fallen, the exact place the eighth arbiter fell, only dressed as kindness instead of greed. I had not fallen, but I had felt the edge of it under my boot, and I have walked more careful ever since. The claims kept coming. I weighed a famine and the men who let it run. I weighed a fleet that fired on a world that had already surrendered, and the admiral who gave the order and called it prudence. I weighed a thing done to children that I will not write down, and I weighed it true, and the white light went hard and cold around me for a long moment after, the way the air goes still after you have said a thing in a room that needed saying, and now no one can pretend it was not said. My valley stood through all of it. They could not hear the claims, only I could, through the seat, but they could see my face. And they stayed bareheaded the whole long afternoon, witnesses to a thing they did not understand except in the one way that mattered, which was that an old neighbor of theirs was being asked to tell the truth about the worlds, over and over, with no reward and no rest, and was doing it. There is a thing that happens to a man who weighs true for long enough, and I want to set it down, because no one warned me, and it changed me more than the light did. You begin to see the thumb everywhere. Once the seat had taught my eye what a tilted scale looks like, the clean story with the rod under it, the loud claim that comes up light when you finally put the truth on the other pan. I could not stop seeing it. Not just in the great claims the court sent, in everything, in the news that drifted up to the farm on the radio, in the way a thing was worded, a wrong dressed as an order, a hunger dressed as a law. I had spent 60 years half hearing all of it, the way you half hear weather. Now every line of it landed on me like a claim, and some part of me weighed it before I could stop, and most of it came up false. I asked the seat about it in one of the quiet stretches between claims, with the white light low and the valley gone home to supper and only Tom still at the fence because Tom is stubborn. Is this what you do to a man? I said. Do you make him see the scale in everything so he can never again just live in a thing without weighing it? Yes, the central panel said. It did not soften it. The seat never softened anything. That was the mercy of it. That is the cost. The arbiter cannot unsee the scale. He will weigh his bread and his neighbors and his own heart for the rest of his days, and most of what he weighs will come up false, and he will carry the knowing of it. The marks scrolled slow. This is why the seat was given to the humble. The strong want the scale for what it gives. The humble will take it for what it costs, because they have always paid for things and are not afraid of a price. I thought about that for a long while, there in the low light, with Tom's cigarette glowing at the fence. The claims that came in that last stretch were the small ones, oddly. After the great wrongs of the ages, the broken court, the famines, the fleets, the court began sending me things hardly bigger than my own barnyard. Disputes, claims from across the worlds that no one had ever bothered to weigh because they were too small to matter to anyone but the ones inside them. A debt of one coin owed an age and never paid. A name struck from a record out of spite. A single field taken. A man somewhere called a thief his whole life for a thing he did not do, dead now, never cleared. They came up out of the glass, one after another, tiny, and the whole vast restored tribunal turned its 9 hands to each one in turn and gave it its true weight, the same grave, full attention it had given the murder of the court. And I understood that this, too, was the point. This was the thing the strong could never grasp. A true scale does not weigh the great wrong heavier than it is, and it does not weigh the small wrong lighter than it is. The one coin gets its true weight. The struck name gets its true weight. The dead man called a thief gets cleared 9,000 years late by 9 plain people standing in 9 fields across the worlds because his claim was true, and a true claim is owed its weight no matter how small, no matter how poor, no matter that no one with power ever cared. Cleared, I said, of the man called a thief, and I felt it land somewhere, late, useless, necessary, a dead man somewhere, finally not a thief. It would change nothing. It changed everything. It was the whole reason the court had ever been built. Verdict recorded, the panel said. And then because the seat knew me by now, that one was for you as much as for him, arbiter. You wanted to know if the small ones mattered. They are the only ones that ever did. The great wrongs are only many small ones the strong stopped counting. Tom called across the fence then, through the dark, his voice rough. You all right in there, Caleb? You've been standing in that light 8 hours. I'm all right, Tom, I said. And I was. Tired to the bone, changed past recovering. Never again to be just a man who weighed things. But all right, go on home. Tell Marie I'll mend her gate Saturday. You're mending the world's, and you'll mend Marie's gate Saturday, Tom said, and laughed his rough laugh. And I heard him knock his cigarette out on the post. Hell, Caleb, but he did not go. He stayed at the fence, the last of them, all night while I weighed the small claims of the ages one by one, and I have never told him what it meant to me that he stayed, but I weighed that too. His staying, the way the seat had taught me to weigh everything now, and it came up heavy and true and good. Not every claim that came to me wanted weighing. Some came to bargain the way the 8th seat had, and I learned to know them by the shape of the light they rose in. The hardest of those was not an arbiter, it was a house. One of the strong houses themselves, one of the great consortium that had broken the court 9,000 years before, and it had survived too, the way such things do, not in body. The house itself was dust, but as a will, a residue, a hunger that the murdered law had never been able to weigh because there was no court left to weigh it. It rose up out of the glass not as a person but as a pressure, a smooth, cold, reasonable pressure, and it did not accuse me, and it did not plead. It offered. Look at what you hold, it said, and the marks it used were elegant, persuasive, the writing of a thing that had bought 1,000 courts and knew exactly what a court costs. You weigh the worlds. No power has ever held what you hold, and you would spend it mending gates and clearing dead men of petty thefts. The pressure leaned in, smooth as oil. Join the scale to the strong. Weigh with us, not against us. The worlds could be ordered. The weak could be spared their endless small sufferings if a firm hand simply decided once how things should be. You have the hand. We have the vision. Together, no, I said. I did not let it finish. I had stood in too many barns. I knew that particular voice better than any other. The voice that tells you the thumb on the scale is for everyone's good, that fairness is slow and messy, and that a firm but decided hand could just fix it all if you would only stop weighing and start deciding. It is the oldest lie there is. It is the lie that killed the court. You don't want to spare the weak their sufferings, I said. You want to be the one who decides which sufferings count. That's the same thing you've always wanted. That's the thing the court was built to take away from you. A scale doesn't decide how things should be. It tells the truth about how things are. The second it starts deciding, it's not a scale anymore, it's just another fist, and the worlds already have all the fists they can stand. I felt the seat go hard and bright around me, agreeing or maybe just lending me its steadiness. Here's your true weight since you came for it. You're the wrong that called itself order. You always were. The claim against you is every world that fell while you decided which sufferings counted. Recorded, in full. And the answer to your offer is the answer the 9th arbiter gave you 9,000 years ago, the one you killed him for. No, the pressure did not scream the way the 8th seat had. It simply thinned and cooled and lost its smoothness, and at the last it asked one thing, and there was something almost honest in it, the only honest thing it ever said. Why, it said, why will your kind not bend? We offered you everything. Because we've got nothing to sell, I said. We never did. That's the whole secret. You can't buy a man who was never for sale, and you can't frighten a man who's already poor, and you can't flatter a man who knows exactly what he is. You spent 9,000 years hunting the columns. You should have been hunting the people too poor to want what you were offering, but you couldn't. You can't even see us. We're the help. We fixed the baler for a case of beer. I almost smiled. And we kept your scale alive the whole time, right under your reach, and you never once looked down. The pressure was gone before I finished. The glass cleared. Verdict recorded, the central panel said. And then after a moment, in the small private marks it used only for me. That was the last of the great claims arbiter. The old wrongs are weighed. What comes now is only the world, making new ones, the way it always will. The light eased, warm and low. You have done what 9,000 years waited for. You may rest. The other 8 will hold the scale while you sleep. But I did not rest, not yet. There was one more thing the court had not shown me, and I asked for it, standing there bone-tired in the low light with Tom still at the fence. I asked to see the ninth arbiter, the first one. The man in the dying hall who had scattered the seed among the humble, rather than let the strong have it. I wanted to see the face of the one who had trusted people like me with the only thing the powerful ever truly feared. The glass cleared and showed him to me. And he was not a king either. He was an old man in plain clothes, tired the way I was tired, standing in a falling hall with his hand on a black column, putting the scale into the hands of the help, and his face he did it was not despair. It was something steadier. It was the face of a man setting a thing down where he knows it will be safe at last, after a long fear that it would not be. It was near the end, with the great claims weighed and the first arbiter's tired face still fading from glass, that the keepers came. I did not know that is what they were at first. I saw movement at the edge of the white light, out past where my neighbors stood, and I thought more of the valley had come, or the county had finally noticed the pillar of fire standing over my farm and sent someone. But these did not come from the road. They came out of the columns, out of the light itself, stepping down out of the 8 risen seats across my fields, figures of pale, steady glow that resolved as they came near, into people. Plain people, that was the first thing, not robed priests, not tall, hard arbiters. People in work clothes, in clothes I half recognized, and clothes I had never seen. An old woman with a basket still on her arm, a young man with engine grease to the elbow, a child, a stooped man in a coat, almost like my grandfather's brown canvas one. The other keepers, the ones in whom the other 8 seats had woken. They had felt me, the way I had felt them, and the court had let them come, not in body, I think, but as the seat lets a thing be present that is not there, to stand with the ninth, the way the original 9 must have once stood together in the dying hall. The old woman with the basket looked at me across the light and inclined her head, and though she spoke no language I knew, I understood her the way I had understood the 8th seat, through the marks, through the seat itself. "We felt you wake," she said. "We have waited a long time to feel another seat wake." The pale light of her was warm, nothing like the cold blaze the contestant had turned on me. "We thought, each of us, that we were the only one. We thought we were only being fair." "That's what I thought," I said. "I thought I was just a man who weighed things." "Yes," said the young man with the grease on his arms, and he smiled, tired and glad at once. "That is what we all thought. That is why it worked. The strong went looking across 9,000 years for the seats of the tribunal. They tore worlds apart hunting the columns. They never found us because we were not guarding anything. We were just being fair, in small rooms, for no reason, and there is no army that knows how to hunt that. The 8 of them spread out around the ring of my seat, each at the place where one of the fallen seats had once stood, and for a moment, I will swear to this until I die, the broken concrete of my barnyard was not broken concrete at all. It was the floor of the dying hall, vast and old, and the 9 of us stood in it together, the original number restored, plain people everyone. The lowest of 9,000 years gathered at last into the court that the highest had not been fit to keep. My grandfather should have seen it. His mother. All of them in all the doorways. They were the ones who made this. We were just the hands they finally reached. "The court needs 9, the old woman said. "It has 9. The light of all 8 columns and my own rose together, even and steady, and across the worlds I felt the last of the great weight settle. Now it will not sleep again. Now there are 9 keepers who know what they keep, and behind each of us is a line that will keep it after, and the strong will never again be able to kill the scale, because the scale lies in too many small fair hands to ever be found. And if they buy one of us," I said, because I had to ask it, because I had seen what one bought seat did, "if they get to one of the lines, the way they got the 8th. The young man's smile faded to something harder, steadier, an answer he had clearly weighed himself. "Then the other 8 will weigh him true," he said, "as you weighed the 8th. That is the whole of it, friend. That is the only guard a scale ever had. Not walls, not armies, 8 other hands that will not bend, ready to weigh the 9th if he ever does." The keepers stayed a while longer. We did not talk much. There is not much to say between people who have spent their whole lives being quietly fair and just learned it was the same thing all along. We stood in the restored hall that was also my barnyard, under the blue sky that was also the deep between the worlds, and we weighed what came, together, 9 hands on one scale, until the great flood of the unjudged ages had thinned to the steady ordinary trickle of new wrong that the world will always make. And then, one by one, the keepers inclined their heads and stepped back into their columns, and were gone home to their own far fields, and the hall was a barnyard again. And I was alone in the 9th seat with my valley along the fence, and my dog in the grass and the work, the endless plain work, finally my own. The flood of claims thinned after that. Not because the wrongs ran out. There is no bottom to that flood. I know now the worlds make new wrongs faster than any court can weigh the old ones. But because the court, once restored, did not need its ninth arbiter to weigh every single one by hand, the other 8 seats had woken full. Across my fields and the fields beyond and out past the Blue Range, in places I would never see, the scattered seats of the scattered keepers were lighting one by one, and in each of them I understood some other plain person was standing where I stood. A keeper somewhere who had never sold a verdict. The line had not made only me. It had made 9 of us, across all the worlds, the 9 who could hold a scale steady, and the court had found everyone and woken them together, and the weighing that had waited 9,000 years was being shared out at last across 9 fair hands. I felt them. That is the strangest thing I have to tell, and the truest. Through the seat I felt the other 8 arbiters take up their work, far away. Strangers I would never meet, and I knew them the way you know a man is honest by the grip of his hand. One of them was weighing a claim a galaxy off, and weighing it the same way I would have, the strong claim taken apart first, the weak claim given its true heavy weight, and I felt it and thought, yes, that's how we've always done it. We never knew there were others. We thought we were just being fair. We were a court the whole time, scattered, sleeping, fair barnyard by fair barnyard, holding the law alive in the only place the strong never thought to look. In the hands of people too poor to be worth corrupting. The light began to ease. The columns across my fields dimmed from their hard white fire to a low, steady glow, the work light of a court that is open but not in session. And the pressure behind the sky lifted, the great leaning weight setting itself down. My valley still stood along the fence. The sun had moved. It was past noon now. I had been in the seat since morning and felt none of it pass. The central panel rose up before me one last time, and the heavy marks moved across it, slow, deliberate, the writing you only use for what cannot be unsaid. The hum dropped away to nothing. The 8 columns dimmed their scrolling and held. The whole waking tribunal of the founding, 9,000 years asleep, 8 seats fallen. 1 seat kept by the lowest people in the worlds across 90 generations, because the strong had grown tired of true weight. All of it turned to the man who had put his coffee down and spoke. "The verdict returns to you, arbiter," the panel said. I stood in the ring of white light, with the blue sky open above me and my neighbors along the fence and my dog flat in the grass with his ears down, and I read those 5 words, and I felt the whole weight of the keeping settle onto me, and I did not set it down. I knew what the words meant now. The verdict the court had been built to render, the one it could not render, with 8 broken seats and a 9th asleep. The verdict on the worlds themselves, on whether the strong would ever again be told their true weight. That verdict was not the court's to keep. It returned to the keeper, to the hand that had held the scale steady when no one was watching and no one was paying. It came home after 9,000 years to a man in a roofless shed who had only ever wanted his coffee and his quiet, and it asked him the one question the line had been answering, fair barnyard by fair barnyard, since before there were words for it. Would he weigh true, now that it would cost him, now that it would never stop? "All right," I said. My voice was steady, steadier than the day they read out what I owed all those years ago in the small county room. "All right. Bring them. I'll weigh them true." The light came up to meet me, and the worlds laid their long unjudged wrongs at the foot of the 9th seat, and I bent my whole stubborn line to the scale. That was 3 months ago. The shed has no roof. 8 of the columns went back into the ground when the convening eased, all but the one in my barnyard, which stays risen now, a black tower of quiet judgment standing over my fields. My neighbors have stopped staring. They bring me their disputes the way they always did. The dead calf and the broken gate, the drifted fence, the deal gone sour between men who have to live beside each other after. Only now they bring them knowing, and I weigh them the way I always did, the strong against the weak, the many against the one true, and no more. The big claims, the ones from the deep between the worlds, come at night, when the valley sleeps, and I stand in the seat under the cold stars and weigh what the court sends, and set it down, and reach for the next. At night the column lights faint and white, and I lay my hand flat on it the way my grandfather did, the way his mother did, the way all of them did in all the doorways going back, keeping a promise I finally know the reason for. I used to think it was habit. I know now it was them holding the line steady, hand over hand across 9,000 years, so that one day a tired old man could stand inside it and not fall. I am 61 years old. I have worked this ground my grandfather bought and my father kept. I never owned anything a man would envy, and I do not now, because the seat is not a thing you own. It is a thing you carry, true and no more, until the line produces one who can carry it after you. I called my brother the week after. First time in a year. I did not tell him about the court. I told him I was sorry I had let him carry our father alone, and that it had been a thumb on the scale, the only one I ever knew I put there, and that I had finally taken it off. He was quiet a long time. Then he said it was about time, and we talked till the light came up, and that was its own kind of verdict. Recorded somewhere, I think, in a ledger older than both of us. I have started watching the children in the valley, the plain ones, the ones nobody notices, who weigh things and try to weigh them true and do not yet know it is a law. Tom Aldred's youngest girl gave back $1 a man overpaid her at the feed store last week, walked it out to his truck in the rain because it was not hers, and I watched her do it and felt the seat stir under my hand 100 yards off, faint, listening, the way it listened to 9,000 years of plain people being fair for no reward. One of them will put a hand on a stone someday, in a doorway full of light, and the seat will know them, and the line will go on, because the line has only ever needed one thing of us, and it is the one thing the powerful can never manage and the humble can never quite help. Until then, I weigh what comes, true and no more, as we have always done.